Welcome, everybody. And we are at our community gathering tonight, which has the theme of preparing for the holy days, and it's called a retrospective. During the month of Elul, each day there's something to think about, a theme to think about in terms of how we move forward on our own soul journey during this month. And so the question for today that you can keep in the back of your minds, each day there's a different question to consider, is to look at if you've ever challenged God to forgive you when you were sincerely sorry. And, how did that work for you? Something to hold in your mind while we go forward, and we begin by looking at our first text. So this text, and I'm going to ask for a volunteer to read it, but I'd like to tell you a little bit about the author of the text. Rabbi Rachel Barenblatt is a wonderful Jewish renewal rabbi who is a colleague of mine from rabbinical school. And she's also a prolific writer and blogger. That's her profession before she became a rabbi. So she's written many books of poetry on many different themes. And this is one of them. And I love the artwork because I just think it's so apropos. So since I can't see who's on screen, I'm just going to ask for a volunteer if someone would mind unmuting and reading for us if you can see it easily. Okay.
See me. I don't know what happened to me. I'll read it though. It's Marcia.
Okay, thanks, Marcia.
Okay. God and I collaborate on revising the poem of myself. I decide what needs polishing, what to preserve, and what to lose. God reads my draft with pursed lips. If I really mean it, God sings a new song, one strong as stone and serene as silk. I want this year's poem to be joyful. I want this year's poem to be measured like flour, to burn like sweet dry maple. I want every reader to come away more certain that transformation is possible. I'd like holiness to fill my words and my empty spaces. On Rosh Hashanah, it is written, and on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. Who will be a haiku and who a sonnet? Who needs meter and who free verse? Who an epic and who a single syllable? If I only get one sound, may it be yes. May I be one.
Thank you very much, Marcia, for offering to read. And my first question is, have you ever thought of yourself as a poem or your life as a poem? And I'm just curious about that because it's something different from what I've ever thought about in terms of my life. So anyone that would like to contribute, feel free to unmute and tell us if you've ever thought of your life as a poem. Essay, novel, novella, anybody? Go ahead, Marcia.
I mean, I love the poem if I could change the word. So when I read that poem, and I can't, is it Rudyard Kipling? I think it's Rudyard. Maybe it's Kipling. I don't know. I mean, there's certain poems that when you read them, I mean, you just kind of put yourself into that place. And that is one poem that I think that it's like a signature for me because it really means a lot to me. And I just, and I think it's good to have a poem, that really talks to you. So, and that one completely talks to me.
Thank you very much. Anybody else have any thoughts about your life as poetry?
I often think about my life as a sitcom.
Yeah, really. Yeah. And at different times, it might be this month, mine is a drama because I'm moving. At other times, it's a sitcom or a poem, or it's more, free flowing. But I think, in terms of a literary context, it's a very lovely way that she framed that God and I collaborate on revising the poem of myself. And I just think that is such a beautiful way to describe a life. And I believe we have some questions at the end of this particular one. So let's just take a look, see what we've got.
One is, do you need meter or free verse, and why? So, I mean, it's interesting because I think when you have meter, you have structure, you know? And so if you're a person who needs structure, you might say, oh, my life would be more a metered kind of poem where I try to make it rhyme. Free verse, I think, would be more without structure. So you might look at your life that way and see if your life were a poem or a work of art, what it would be.
Lisa,
Yeah,
I
I
think you,
wanted
yeah.
to say that I think it depends on the season, the day, the week, because sometimes you absolutely have to have some structure, you know, when you're working or you got kids that need to go this and that and the other. But then there are times when you just, you know, do something spontaneously with them. And so that would be more like free verse. And for me, I see it just going back and forth as a flow. So I guess my poem is like that.
But that's interesting what you said, because if we only used one form, then how how boring might life be, and how many opportunities might we miss if we were structured into one particular genre of poetry that described our life and we never moved out of that. I mean, isn't part of the beauty to be able to move, you know, fluidly from one to another? So welcome, Cheryl, and welcome, Erica. I see that you came in, and I also see that Tehila Gomez is on in not with camera. So welcome, everyone. And the question was referring back to our first text, which was God and I collaborate on revising the poem of myself. And I asked the question, do you ever think of your life as a poem? And we were answering that. And then we looked at, you know, would you envision it as, you know, sonnet or meter, or, you know, what, you know, division of that? So Cheryl, anything you're thinking?
Well, I haven't ever thought of it as a poem, but if I were to, I think it would have to be sort of free verse, not real rigid, because to me that allows for change. A sonnet has a set form, and I like the idea of freedom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Anybody else want to venture a thought?
Yeah, well, I never thought of it that way, but it's a beautiful way of thinking of it. I just think it's just the thought of it, life being a poem. It's, you know, it's
Beautiful.
to think about.
Yeah, thank you, Erica. I was thinking in looking at the text again, you know, and maybe could we put it up one more time? Is that okay? And I'll read a little bit of the parts that stood out for me, and maybe people would comment on them. So Reb Rachel says, you know, in the text, God and I collaborate on revising the poem of myself. So that's a really strong message in terms of sort of the covenant, the individual covenant between God and each of us, and how that faith in God helps us change and grow, you know, and I decide what needs polishing, what to preserve, what to lose. And God reads the draft. Can you just see God with pursed lips, you know, thinking about that, you know? If I really mean it, God sings a new song, one strong as stone and serene as silk. And then Rachel says, I want this year's poem to be joyful, to be measured like flour, to burn like sweet dry maple. I want every reader to come away more certain that transformation is possible. And I think that's the whole thought behind her prayer, is that if we have faith and we work with this covenant with God, then transformation is possible, and it will become, you know, a beautiful year ahead. You know, I'd like holiness to fill my words and my empty spaces. And then the big statement on Rosh Hashanah, it's written, and on Yom Kippur, it is sealed. Who will be a haiku and who a sonnet? Who needs meter and who free verse? Who an epic and who a single syllable? And you may be an epic this year, but last year, perhaps you were a haiku. You know, maybe that's what your life was like. If I only get one sound, may it be yes, may it be one. So any thoughts again on the second reading of this, just on the poem itself?
It's a beautiful poem, and there are several things in it that reverberate with me about, uh, you know, becoming so that other people can see what you're trying to do, not just within yourself. Not just, well, I think I'm going to be better, but that you demonstrate so that other people can read your poem and know that you've made that step.
And as you said that, I thought, what if I'm a haiku for 4 months this year, and you know me and you don't really like haikus, and you might not like me because the form that I'm trapped, the poem of my life, the poem of myself is not a genre that you can relate to. And so we might not connect. We might not be able to walk in harmony or be in harmony with each other or even have any relationship at all. But as I change, maybe for a part of, that year, I am maybe a free form novella, and you like novellas, so like you're in, and we'll get to know each other, and vice versa. So I think there's a lot of possibilities that Rachel puts out here. She's an incredibly talented writer. I was telling Nina when we put this together, she's written probably more than 25 books of poetry that have been out. Just they're all over the place. She's prolific, and now she's working as a rabbi up in either New Hampshire or Maine, somewhere way north, for a small community. And she loves to create her own things, booklets and all kinds of services and things. And this is just a blessing. Go ahead, Cheryl.
So I have one comment to go back on what you said about the haiku. Is if I meet my goal, part of it would be to be open to accepting other people, in which case I might not relate to your haiku, but I might have respect for it and enjoy you having it.
Yeah, thank you. I think being open to the different forms of poems that each person represents really allows us to have more relationships and to be open to live in the world in a different way, and not live in the world in a box, but live in the world in an ocean of all of those experiences that are out there. So other comments before we go forward? Does anyone have any other thoughts?
We do have some more
Barb?
questions on this too.
Yeah. Barbara, yeah, go ahead, Barb.
Okay, I just keep it short. This is very different, it's a very lovely concept, but I've never really thought about things this way. But I have to say, right, from the very beginning, with the God and I collaborate, my upbringing, getting ready for the holiday, I have always felt, or maybe been made to feel and not thought about it, that God is up there waiting for me to just do better with what I have to correct and what I want to change and what I want to be better at going forward, and other things we're supposed to do, like apologizing for things that did not go the way that we would have loved for them to go, and trying to make up for that, or if there is no making up, just trying to do the best we can with whoever we have to do it with and ourselves. So that's all. But yeah, it's very amazing.
And I'm thinking of the line that says, God reads this with pursed lips. God reads my draft with pursed lips. And I'm thinking to myself, I can't help but say it, is God red penning this? And saying, we can make a change here. This is spelled wrong. This piece of your life, meaning, you're not doing it right. Maybe you need to be doing it differently because you spelled it wrong. You have the wrong concept. No, I'd substitute this phrase for this phrase of your life. And, maybe we'll put a metaphor in here and we'll change things around. So it's very interesting to me how this speaks. And we do have other questions to go forward, so to continue the conversation. So if we could take the next question, maybe we can do it that way.
It's interesting because it relates to what you just said. Is do you see it as an epic or single syllable? And what does that actually mean? You know, a single syllable that's going to get you through all this time. An epic, are you going to have a really complicated year? Like what, or how do you see yourself, as an epic or a single syllable or something in between?
Well, and also I see myself as towards the end of my life. And what does that really mean? You know, so
And
Yeah,
is that an epic? I mean, is that a life review of a story, and the story is the epic of your life? You know, and what chapters are in it and what people are in it, and would you rewrite the epic looking back? Would you change, you know, anything or see something, you know, through a different lens because you've lived all these years?
it's interesting. I always say I'm like starting chapter 3. And I think that's something a lot of people see this stage of life in, as chapter 3. So yeah. It's interesting to see ourselves as a chapter book.
Cheryl, did you also want to add to?
Well, I did, but my sister had surgery today and she's just calling right now. So I'll be back.
Okay.
Okay, see you in a little bit. Okay, anybody else? Single syllable, epic, what do you think? Single syllable with potential to become an epic? You know, what's the potential of the single syllable? What if it starts with a single syllable? Where's it going to go? Will it remain a single syllable? Will your life remain a single syllable just because it starts that way? Or does that syllable have the potential to grow into, you know, a short story, a poem, a book of poetry, you know, a saga of some sort? You know, where will it go? Where will you take it? Because it depends what you want to do with it. It's a great opportunity at the High Holy Day time to think about this.
We'll have to check back and see what people have become.
So why don't we take a look at our next one? I guess we have to put it up on the. Here we go. And this is a text from Mishneh Torah on the tractate Repentance. And I would again ask for someone who can see it clearly if you might volunteer to read for us.
I could see.
Okay, Barbara.
Okay. It is forbidden for a person to be cruel and refuse to be appeased. Rather, he should be easily pacified, but hard to anger. When the person who wronged him asks for forgiveness, he should forgive him with a complete heart and a willing spirit. Even if he aggravated and wronged him severely, he should not seek revenge or bear a grudge. This is the path of the seed of Israel and their upright spirit.
Okay, so just take a look again. I want to read it to myself again and take a minute with it.
One thing I want to put some emphasis on, what does it mean to forgive according to this? Just put it in your head. We don't have to answer it yet, but look carefully and think, what are the things you shouldn't do if you're forgiving? We'll just keep this in our heads for when we start our discussion.
Okay, so questions, comments on this text as we go forward with our questions. And this is all about forgiveness, the theme of the month. I think maybe we could take it down if you're able to. It's so pretty though, the colors really nice.
Yeah.
And any thoughts on this particular text just in general? Does this text speak to you at all? Marcia?
I just think it's very hard to forgive completely.
That's interesting.
Yeah,
That's what
I
this
just
is.
looked at it and I said, really? You know, I mean, I'm not saying, but I think that's well, for me, that would be a very hard thing to do. I mean, I can say it and I can say I forgive you, but there's always that little something, not in all cases, but in many cases, that's just very hard to do. So to follow
That's
that
what I-
text or to do that would be very hard for me.
Well, that depends on what it means to forgive, which is what we're going to get into in a little
Yeah.
while.
Yeah.
Well,
Hang on for the continued
that
discussion.
blatantly sticks,
Lisa, go ahead.
I agree with Marcia because there are things that could be, over a lifetime really, and then you need to be able to forgive that, and that is because I mean it's shaped so much of who you are, and so it's very hard to do that. And totally, like she said, just to have that little niggling in your head about it.
And are you able to tilt your camera so we can see it more
No,
than your?
today's everything's messed up. Hello, everyone. Hi.
Okay. Okay. Just wanted to see the rest of you. So I think it is, I think we agree it's very hard. And, it's, you, if you're cruel and if you refuse to be appeased, you're considered to be cruel. I mean, that's a cruelty if you won't let yourself be appeased. And that's really something to think about. If you think about times when, you haven't let it go. And it's very interesting. I'll just share a true story with you. So sitting here on the bed with me tonight is my dog, Sammy, who is just going to be 2 years old in a couple of weeks. And we had a visitor for this past week, my daughter's dog, Ella, who's 4 years old. And they're the same breed of dog. And they got along really, really great until last night when Ella took out one of her toys and Sammy tried to get it. It was her favorite toy. And you heard shrieking like you would think somebody's guts were being ripped out. It only lasted for like 10 seconds, but it was really bad. I mean, we didn't know what to do. And my husband stepped in and he like pulled him apart. And we yelled at Sammy and we put her in timeout for a few minutes and then we let her out. And she was very contrite. She was contrite for the rest of the evening and actually for all of today. And she kept trying to make it up to Ella. She kept trying to apologize. She would go over and try to nuzzle her and she would bring her something, a toy. She really felt bad. I mean, you could tell. And if you don't believe in animals feeling badly, then okay, you think I'm crazy. But the thing is, my daughter said today when she came to pick her up, how did things go? And we told her about this one incident. We said everything went great except for this one incident. And she said, did Ella forgive her? And was she able to, continue to have a relationship with her after Sammy tried to make nice to her? And we said no. And she said, that's one of the problems Ella has. She doesn't forgive and she doesn't know how to pick up the relationship again. And she's always been like that with her, the other dogs she goes to like doggy daycare or whatever. And so it was just interesting because she wasn't letting herself be appeased and she wasn't letting it go. She just kept turning her head and walking away and really was being not forgiving. So I think it's an instinct people have, not only people, but, creatures have about this. And, if somebody asks for forgiveness, we're told to forgive them with a complete heart and a willing spirit. The way we rush to do a mitzvah, if you get called for an aliyah, you rush to the bima, you go quicker when you go up and slower when you go down. I mean, that you should rush to fulfill this mitzvah of forgiving people. And even if you've been wronged severely. So and you shouldn't bear grudge and you shouldn't, look for revenge. Is that reasonable? That's my question. That's Deb Smith asking, could we really,
I'd like to put something in here. I did a lot of research because like everybody on this webinar, there's something left. So we divided it up, my Chai Mitzvah group and I, and actually one of the members has recently gotten into Chabad and he actually asked his rabbi. So according to the Talmud, you can't bear a grudge and you can't seek revenge, but you do not have to trust the person. If you still have that thing in your heart, maybe that's for a good reason. So while you don't, you need to not bear a grudge. You need to not try to torture the person. You not to try to make bad things happen to that person. But you are not required in your heart to trust that person to get into that situation again. I thought that was very interesting when we discovered that. Like that to me was a real insight, an aha moment.
Marcia, and then Barbara.
I have to leave. I'm so sorry, but I
Oh,
had to.
that's okay. Okay, nice to see you, though.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Barbara, and then Lisa. I think you had your hand up also.
Thank you. That's kind of where it edges into for me, where I have been forgiven by someone who I remember how this felt, that I knew I really hurt and I really was very sorry. And I know how it felt to be forgiven, but I also know, right, that things changed. And the same thing, there's someone that will never apologize to me that I wish that would, but the only choice that I have is to forgive them for what they cannot do, because I have to go on, and this is a whole other ball game, going on at the same time. It's not a game. This is life. And there's something, right, there's an edge to this that says we do forgive, and we want to forgive, and believe that the person means it who is asking you. So yes, we should grant it, but we don't have to forget, or at least here in Brooklyn, New York, we're just so cynical that we do not have to forget. We learn. We might have to learn something that we wish we just didn't have to know. And you may treat that person right. It may be trust a little bit less the next time, or maybe you temper how you don't tell that person everything that you used to, or you don't call them as often, and they might call you so often, but you have to manage, where do you want this to go, if you want this relationship, because it hurts, but we have learned something, and there's more to it than I would like there to be, but this is reality. This is real. Thank you.
And maybe that person has moved from your A list to your B list, because,
Yes,
hate
exactly.
to put it that way, but yes, I mean,
Exactly. Yeah,
they,
that,
you're
yeah.
cordial, you're friendly, you can sit down and, share a cup of tea and conversation about whatever, but are they going to get the inner guts of your, what you're feeling? Probably not, probably not. So it's a shift, and it's a loss. It's a loss as well.
It's a loss, but it's necessary.
Thank you. I think, Lisa, you also had your hand up.
I was kind of, saying the same. Yes, I'm saying yes to what they've been saying, that you don't forget, and you don't necessarily trust as much prior to, but I think same thing, kind of like we were talking about life coming and going versus free flow. There are, sometimes you're fine with everything. Okay, whatever has happened when you're trying to forgive, and then there's other times it's like kind of gets back into your craw again, and you're like, okay, let's kind of chill a little bit here. But I think it is hard to forget, as well as to not think about sometimes.
Anybody else? Erica?
Yes. How do you come to terms of forgive? Some things are not forgivable, like the Nazis, for instance. I mean, how do you come to terms with it?
It's such a hard question. I don't have an answer, but I will just say, if you've ever read the book The Sunflower, has anyone ever read that book?
Which book?
The Sunflower. Nina, have you read it?
No, I haven't, but I'm going to send a link in our follow-up.
This book is a very interesting book. Let me just also pull it up so I can reference something in there. I just packed the book because I'm moving, and I just put it away yesterday. Let me pull it up here. Okay. It's now gone into an expanded version from the original version. But this book, The Sunflower by Simon Wiesenthal, is subtitled On the Possibilities and Limits of Forgiveness. and it's an incredible book. It looks at it's probably one of the most books that's influenced me in my whole life. I just want to read you a paragraph just about what the book is, and you'll see why I'm putting it out there. A Holocaust survivor's surprising and thought-provoking study of forgiveness, justice, compassion, and human responsibility, featuring contributions from the Dalai Lama, Harry Wu, Cynthia Ozick, Primo Levi, and more. And it says, you're a prisoner in a concentration camp. A dying Nazi soldier asks you for your forgiveness. What would you do? And it goes through asking all these different people, would they forgive this person on their deathbed? They are begging for forgiveness so that they can die absolved of what they've done. And there are a lot of different answers. So there's no one answer that I could say, well, this or that. But the reason I bring that up, Eric, is because of the question you asked. Are there some crimes that are not forgivable, are not ones that are forgivable? And I think that varies for each person. We have the freedom to really do with that what we want. Simon Wiesenthal, there's a show, a one-man show. It's called Wiesenthal Now, and it's traveling across the country. And I just today bought tickets to see it. It's going to be in Florida this winter. And it will be a very interesting, in light of this book and the theme of this book and this discussion, to see what the play is about, what the story is about. So any responses to Erica's comment and question? Any, do you have any thoughts on that? Sometimes you can't forgive, and that may just be the answer to your question.
But I'm not talking about forgiveness, but yet just coming to terms with it for me, for myself.
Mm-hmm.
How do I do that? I don't know.
Well, I think the answer is not a short one, so I wouldn't want to be disrespectful and just brush you off. But I think it takes a lot of work, a lot of emotional work, and a lot of psychological work to really sort out how to do that, and if indeed you can do it. You may find at the end you can't.
Sometimes I think you have to live the best life you can, and be grateful that you're okay. But it's true. Some things are just above and beyond.
That's true. Okay.
Any other comments? Do we have other questions under this? I don't want to, unless you want to put it back, or.
Well, we have some more. We have some more text about forgiveness, and then some questions that have to do with it, so I can share those.
Yeah, if you could put up text 3 by Anonymous.
Yeah.
Anon. Anon says there are two kinds of forgiveness: the kind when you give them another chance, the kind you forgive but move on without them. Use both wisely. So there are two kinds of forgiveness: the kind when you give them another chance, or the kind you forgive but move on without them. Use both wisely. And then sort of connected to that is text 4. If you can't forgive and forget, pick one. And I first want to just ask if you have any reactions to these two texts, just the way they stand on paper, on screen. Any thoughts about these as advice that you could take for yourselves?
I'm thinking about Erica's thoughts, and maybe if you can't forgive and forget, pick one. Maybe you can't even forget, but maybe it can dim a little bit in your daily life.
Anybody else have any thoughts about either of these texts?
I think that on the anonymous, for me, in a situation that happened to me years and years ago, I think it was 2 came before 1. First, I had to move on. I had to say, it's over, it's done with. I'm going forward. I can't let it be on me and in me forever. And then I was able to give, and I found out late as time went on that I was able to give another chance. So it was sort of reverse order.
Mhm. Thank you. Anybody else? Other thoughts on these two texts? One or the other? They're very interesting texts. I like they stay with you. And I was thinking of one of the things that I saw on the news this week with the trials of the Proud Boys, and how one of them, now two of them that I've seen, but one in particular where I actually saw it on the news, just cried and begged for forgiveness and was so remorseful and, this, that, and the other thing. And, then walked outside the courtroom and raised a fist and just, said, yo, you know what I mean? So, how sincere was that? And that's, I think, part of the question. But I wanted to ask another question. And Nina, thank you for sending these to me because I don't have that particular page. I don't know what happened to it.
I
But
can read your mind.
yeah, maybe you can actually, so I can close this off my screen. Would you just read the next question, and that would be helpful?
Sure. It's interesting because it relates to what we've been saying. We talked about what it means to forgive Jewishly. What do you need to do in order to forgive Jewishly? We can go back to the text we read about what you can't do and what you can do and see if it resonates with you.
Could you or couldn't you?
Well, you're supposed to not bear a grudge.
Right.
The example they give in the Talmud, it's interesting. It's like if you ask somebody, can I borrow your, I don't know, your leaf blower? And they say no, and you're really hurt and angry. When they come to ask you for something, you shouldn't say no. That's
Right.
bearing a grudge. If you ask somebody for something and they say no, and then they come to you and they ask you to borrow something, you can't say, yes, but remember when you didn't lend me your thing?
Right.
That is like looking for revenge. So you can't do those two things. And if you intend to forgive Jewishly. However, and you should, everybody knows, it's said so often, bearing a grudge or it's like taking poison yourself and expecting the other person to die. So you have to let it go on some level, or it's only going to hurt you. But by the same token, it doesn't mean you shouldn't feel guilty if in your heart you still don't feel 100%, because maybe you shouldn't feel 100%. Maybe that person did something that's really not trustworthy, and it would be foolish to expect them to be different. Maybe you have to accept who they are and say, okay, I don't want to hurt you, but I'm also not going to trust you with my heart, because that's not going to go well for me either. So that's kind of the answer, what you need to do in order to forgive Jewishly.
And part of the process might be the education you've received from the experiences, that how far you will go, how far you'll let them in, how far you will take it the next time. Having had the experience this time, where will it go for you next? What does it mean to take the road forward with that person? What is it going to, what is the scenery going to look like? It's going to be very different from the scenery that, you just walked out of that village and you're not going back there again. So what is the new scenery going to look like? And how do you paint it so that it works for you and you can live with it?
Yeah, there's an example in terms of the Holocaust that I was thinking of as you were talking about that, is after World War II, many people would not buy German products, German cars or whatever. And over the decades, it turned out that Germany is the country that put into place laws, that crack down on treating people poorly, and built Holocaust museums, and the nation did some remorse, not necessarily all the individuals, but the nation. And so, time changes, and maybe people to turn that toward an individual relationship. Maybe over time you can get back to having a relationship with a person.
It's interesting that you say that. Years ago, many years ago, my husband bought a Mercedes and drove it to synagogue. We were going to services, and the rabbi took him to task. He just like trashed my husband in the parking lot for buying the Mercedes. And this was after Germany had done all these reparative things. But he said, you can never forget, and you should, you shouldn't buy this car, whatever. So my husband has the car, and he's driving the car, and the car had some mechanical issues, and it kept like stalling, and he had to be towed and whatever. So he went back to the dealership, and the owner said, bring it in and the guys will take a look at it. And the owner wasn't there, or the manager, whatever, wasn't there. And my husband came in, and when he walked into the place, he heard the two salesmen trashing the Jews. Like they were having some conversation where they were just like going to town. And he walked up to them. He had brought the car in, with the keys to just drop it off. And he said, I can't just stand here and not say anything. He said, I'm Jewish, and how dare you, you have no right. I mean, how do you, he really took them to task. And then he went home and he called the dealership and spoke with the manager like the next day. And the manager was so horrified that these people had spoken like this that they were let go. He called my husband back. He said, I fired them. They're gone. And I have thought about that story over the years many, many times, because I felt that was justice being served, but it was also, can you forgive and forget that? You could say, well, how stupid these people were. They were just ignorant and, whatever. But I think they were more than ignorant, but we'll just let it go at that. But what I think is that, how do you go on from a situation, and that you cannot compare that to losing family members in the Holocaust, for sure you can't. But, you look at a situation like that, and how do you move forward? And can you forgive and forget that, and forgive and forget the incidents that we see of anti-Semitism today, that they don't want to call them anti-Semitism, but, like a swastika on the wall of your synagogue outside is, surely not an invitation to the spring dance. It is what it is. And so I think that these texts that we have, really, they challenge us to decide how we're going to stand in the world, and who we're going to be, and how we're going to relate to people, and what kind of role models are we going to be? What kind of examples are we going to set? And I think it's interesting, because another thing it makes me think of, these quotes, is something that happened in my professional life, which I'm not at liberty to, divulge. It didn't happen to me personally, but people were saying, okay, we have to move forward and act on this, and, educate people to not do this again, and not have this situation happen again. And someone responded and said, and what about acknowledging the pain of the people who were hurt, and saying you're sorry, and, being able to do that, not just go forward from here, but go backwards to make the apology, and to really understand that needs to be part of the process of forgiving and moving forward, is acknowledging the damage and the pain of the people who were harmed, and, saying it was real, not saying, come on, pick yourself up, let's go on from here. Just let's forgive and forget, which is what these quotes are making me think about. So I know I'm looking at my watch, so I want to make sure we go forward and get to everything. So let's go on to the next one. Yeah. So we have the next text from Unatana Tokef. And again, I would ask if there could be a volunteer reader for this.
I will.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Lisa.
Text 5, Unatana Tokef. The following line in the Unatana Tokef has a powerful shift in the language from its original in the Talmud to its codification in the Siddur. This change offers a response regarding what we can do in the face of questions that can otherwise block our ability to move forward. The language of the liturgy attempts to empower us when it feels like we are powerless to determine our own destiny. R. Isaac further said, 4 things cancel the doom of a man, namely charity, supplication, change of name, and change of conduct. Some say that change of place, that also avails. That's from the Babylonian Talmud 16b. But tshuva, tefillah, and tzedakah have the power to transform the harshness of our destiny. That's the Unatana Tokef.
Thanks, Lisa. Thank you.
Would you like me to go to the next one that?
Yeah,
uh,
yeah.
Okay, there we go.
Any readers on this one? Or I can start and maybe Nina, you'll take the second paragraph. We'll split it up. Okay.
Sure.
The Talmud claims that these activities will actually cause the decree to be torn up, ma'akirin. That which was decreed to happen will in fact not happen. The liturgy, however, makes a very different claim, namely that prayer, righteousness, and tshuva will not change what happens to us, rather they will change us. We will understand what happens differently. These activities will not tear up the decree, rather they will transform ma'avirin, the evil of the decree. Spiritual practice won't change what happens, rather it will help us to experience what happens not as evil, but simply as what happens. Spiritual practice will help us to understand that everything that happens, even the decree of death, flows from God.
This difference of one little verb represents an immense theological sea change, 1,000 years in the making. It took approximately that long for Jews to notice that there were people in their midst who spent the 10 days between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur praying fiercely, performing righteous deeds until they collapsed in exhaustion, repenting prodigiously and with unassailable sincerity, but who nevertheless died during the following year. In fact, there were people who behaved this way all year long and still died. So when the Torah spoke of atonement and the Talmud spoke of tearing up the divine decree, obviously they were not talking about something that took place in the visible world. They were talking about an invisible process. They were talking about a simple spiritual process. They were talking about transformation. This is from Rabbi Alan Liu. This is real and you were not prepared. And I'm going to go back for 1 second. And you can see the Hebrew, the letter that is in green shows the difference between ma'akrin and ma'avirin. Okay, and that shows the difference between tearing up the decree and experience a change within yourself.
So I want to just put in a plug for the book, Alan Liu's book. This is real and you are not prepared. It's a book that I read every year in the month of Elul, and I study it with people during this month because it's the book to read that gets you ready for the high holy days. I highly, highly, highly recommend it. If you do any kind of, self-searching work or spiritual improvement work, and you ever want to do something before the high holy days or during the month of, this is the book to read. So I highly recommend it. And now we can go on now that I've put in a plug for Alan Liu's book. So.
Yeah. So we might be wondering, what do we think of this explanation? And how might these insights serve as a call to inspire our own personal action? How does it make us less helpless? And what personal action might each person take in the coming year?
Thank you, Diana. Be well. Shana Tova.
Shana Tova. Thanks for coming.
Same to you too. Thank you.
So it's a tough question. I think it's a tough question. Can you just repeat it again as we
So
paused for a minute?
yeah, as we're thinking about what Rabbi Alanu said, what is your reaction to it? And how are you going to apply it to your own life if you think it's, worth applying? What kinds of actions can each of us take in the coming year?
I guess my question is, how will you transform the evil decree? I'll push it a little bit, and what kind of practices can we undertake for ourselves that will change the path of the decree by changing ourselves inside? Who can we be that might be different than who we are?
Well, transforming oneself is hard work, and it doesn't necessarily happen just because you want it to. And and it may take multiple years. Like last year at this time, I went through this process of thinking about something I felt I needed to do to transform me. And I did make some steps, but this year, I think I stick with the same because I didn't get all the way there. And transformation, sometimes it takes time and work.
So can I ask you, did you progress maybe a couple of inches forward?
I did. I don't have a very good memory and never have. And I really sometimes forget or don't remember to ask about certain things that people are going through or friends. I want to check up on them, and I don't always. So I'm working on not just writing places to be in my calendar, but reminders so that I can move forward on this important, I think, important step for me in transformative step.
So, the reason I asked you if you move forward a few inches was because that means, you're on the journey and it's a small change, but it's a positive one moving forward. And you don't have to complete the journey. You just have to put a step out there. So that's really
Thank
great.
you.
That's great to hear. I mean, that's really wonderful that you're doing that and that you've moved forward on that, because you're on the path,
Yeah. And for me, it took actually writing down something that, and not just having it in my head, because then I would forget it. I wouldn't remember.
So then you actually did significant work because you made a change of how you were going to solve it by deciding to write it down. So you're on the continuum. Yay. Yeah. Anybody else? Anyone else have any thoughts on how you're going to transform the decree and transform yourself? What you can do? I think that that's a question I'm going to just say that we need to take beyond tonight. Everyone needs to take it and figure out where the transformation is going to occur and how it's going to occur within each of ourselves. And so that's what I'd like to leave everyone with at the end of this session tonight, because I think we need to each decide on our own work going forward and how we're going to accomplish that. But I think that the session we did together tonight was spectacular work for the month of Elul. Like, I feel like I did good Elul work for myself in doing, being here and participating in this discussion. It was really life-changing. And so I'm very grateful to everybody for coming. And thank you, Nina, for technical support, artistic support, and all of the conversation that you contributed that was so meaningful to the discussion. So I don't know that we will not be seeing each other before the high holy days, those of us on this call. So I want to just take the opportunity to wish all of you and your families Shana Tova Umetuka. May it be a happy new year and a sweet one.